Cecilia Meadows had never seen a more perfect sunset. The sky blazed in shades of amber and rose as she stood before her guests, her white gown catching the last golden rays of light. She couldn't stop the tears that welled in her eyes as Bradley slipped the ring onto her finger. 3 years of dating had led to this moment, the happiest day of her life. Looking up at Bradley Thompson, with his chiseled jawline and warm hazel eyes, Cecilia felt her heart swell with love. He was everything she had ever wanted. Successful, charming, and seemingly devoted to her. The way he looked at her made her feel like the only woman in the world. Tammy Webster, her maid of honor, dabbed at her own eyes as she stood beside them. Tammy had been Cecilia's rock for over 15 years, through college, career changes, and heartbreaks. When Cecilia and Bradley had started dating, it was Tammy who had encouraged the relationship, insisting they were perfect for each other. Now, as Tammy handed over the rings with a beaming smile, Cecilia silently thanked the universe for blessing her with such a steadfast friend. From the corner of her eye, Cecilia spotted her sister, Jeanne, sitting somewhat awkwardly in the second row. They hadn't spoken much in 5 years, not since their father's funeral had erupted into a heated argument about old family wounds. Cecilia had been surprised when Jeanne accepted the wedding invitation, traveling all the way from Phoenix for the ceremony. There was a moment, just a brief one, when their eyes met across the small gathering, and Jeanne offered a tentative smile. Perhaps this new beginning in Cecilia's life could also mark a fresh start with her sister. The reception was held in the lodge's glass-walled great room, with twinkling lights strung overhead and centerpieces of white peonies and eucalyptus, all Tammy's careful work. As dinner progressed, Cecilia found herself watching Bradley and Tammy in conversation, their heads bent together in what appeared to be serious discussion. For a fleeting second, she noticed something strange in the way Bradley's hand lingered on Tammy's arm, but the thought vanished when he caught her gaze and raised his glass in a private toast to her from across the room. "You look absolutely stunning," he mouthed, and her momentary unease dissolved. The night progressed with dancing, laughter, and so many warm embraces from friends and family that Cecilia felt almost light-headed with happiness. Around 11:30, Bradley appeared at her side, slipping his arm around her waist. "Ready to call it a night, Mrs. Thompson?" he whispered against her ear. The honeymoon suite was a vision of romance, with rose petals scattered across the bed and champagne chilling in an ice bucket. Cecilia felt a rush of excitement as Bradley closed the door behind them. This was the beginning of their life together, their first night as husband and wife. But something shifted almost immediately. Bradley loosened his tie and sank onto the small love seat in the corner, running a hand through his dark hair. "God, I'm exhausted," he sighed, reaching for the champagne. That was quite a production, wasn't it? Cecilia blinked, taken aback by his sudden change in demeanor. "It was beautiful," she said, stepping out of her heels. Everything was perfect. "It was," Bradley agreed, but there was something hollow in his voice. He poured 2 glasses of champagne, handed one to her, then quickly drained his own. "Listen, Cecilia, I hope you don't mind, but I think I need to sleep on the couch tonight." Her glass froze halfway to her lips. "What?" "I'm just completely wiped out," he explained, not quite meeting her eyes. "Between work stress this week and today's excitement, I feel like I could sleep for days. I don't want to toss and turn and keep you up all night." "But it's our wedding night," Cecilia said, unable to keep the hurt from her voice. Bradley finally looked at her, his expression softening. "I know, and I'm sorry. I promise I'll make it up to you. We have our whole lives ahead of us, right?" He crossed the room and kissed her forehead. Not her lips, not passionately as she had imagined, but a chaste peck that felt more obligatory than loving. "Let's just get some rest," he continued, already moving toward his suitcase. "Tomorrow's another day." Cecilia stood motionless, still holding her untouched champagne. watching as her new husband casually unpacked his pajamas and toiletry bag. She felt as though someone had suddenly pumped all the air from her lungs. This was not how she had imagined their wedding night. Not even close. Was he really that tired? Or was there something else going on? She tried to push away the insecure thoughts creeping into her mind. They had 3 wonderful years together. Surely one night of exhaustion didn't mean anything sinister. "Right," she managed finally. "You take the bed. I'll sleep on the couch." "Don't be silly," Bradley insisted. "You're the bride. Take the bed." After an awkward dance of goodnights, Cecilia found herself alone in the massive 4-poster bed, staring up at the ceiling. Outside, she could hear the last of their wedding guests departing, car doors slamming and laughter fading into the night. On the other side of the room, Bradley's breathing quickly deepened into sleep, or what sounded like sleep. She lay awake for what felt like hours, replaying the day in her mind, trying to pinpoint when things had started to feel off. Had she imagined that strange moment between Bradley and Tammy? Was she overreacting about the sleeping arrangements? Cecilia turned onto her side, watching the digital clock on the nightstand tick past 1 o'clock, then 2. Sleep remained elusive, her mind too full of conflicting emotions. Joy from the beautiful ceremony, confusion about Bradley's behavior, and a gnawing sense of unease she couldn't quite name. Just past 3 in the morning, Cecilia drifted into a fitful sleep, only to jolt awake at 4:15 to the sound of a door closing. The couch across the room was empty, Bradley's blanket thrown aside. Sitting up, she listened intently. Where had he gone? Perhaps he had just stepped out to use the bathroom. But minutes passed, and he didn't return. Moving as quietly as possible, Cecilia slipped from the bed and pulled on her robe. She opened the suite door just a crack, peering into the dimly lit hallway of the lodge. Empty. She stepped outside, barefoot on the plush carpet, and stood still, listening. That's when she heard it. Hushed voices coming from down the corridor, from the direction of the guest rooms. Her heart pounding, Cecilia moved silently toward the sound. As she drew closer, she recognized Bradley's deep timbre, followed by a woman's softer tones. She froze, just around the corner from what she knew was Tammy's room. The door was slightly ajar, casting a thin line of light across the hallway floor. "This is torture," Tammy's voice came clearly now. "Watching you with her all day, pretending to be happy for both of you." "I know, love," Bradley replied, his voice tender, in a way it hadn't been with Cecilia earlier. "But we agreed. We need to handle this carefully." "When are we going to tell her?" Tammy asked. "I can't keep doing this, Brad. It's been 4 months of sneaking around, and now you're married to her." 4 months. The words hit Cecilia like a physical blow. 4 months. They had been together for 3 years, and for the last 4 months Bradley had been having an affair with her best friend, her maid of honor, the woman who had helped her choose her wedding dress. Soon, Bradley promised, but not immediately after the wedding. That would be cruel. We need to give it a little time, make it seem like things just didn't work out naturally. "And what about tonight?" Tammy's voice had dropped to a whisper. "You're supposed to be in your honeymoon suite." "I told her I was too tired," Bradley replied with a small laugh, "that I needed to sleep on the couch." "And she believed that? On your wedding night?" She didn't question it. Cecilia's always been trusting. The contempt in his voice as he said her name was the final twist of the knife. Cecilia backed away, her hand pressed against her mouth to stifle any sound. She retreated quickly to their suite, slipping back inside just as she heard movement from Tammy's room. She barely made it to the bed, pulling the covers over herself, before the door to their suite opened and Bradley crept in. She kept her breathing deep and even, feigning sleep as he settled back onto the couch. But sleep was now impossible. Cecilia lay with her eyes closed, tears silently soaking into her pillow, as the first pale light of dawn began to filter through the curtains. Her wedding day had become her greatest heartbreak, and the night that should have sealed their love had revealed the ugliest of betrayals. Morning arrived with cheerful sunshine that felt like a mockery to Cecilia. She had watched the minutes tick by on the bedside clock, her mind replaying the overheard conversation like a torturous loop. When Bradley finally stirred around 7:30, she pretended to wake up, forcing a smile that felt like shattered glass on her lips. "Good morning, husband," she managed to say, testing him, watching his reaction. Bradley stretched and offered her a casual smile. "Morning. Sleep well?" "Not really," she admitted truthfully. "I missed you beside me." A flicker of something, guilt perhaps, crossed his face before he masked it with a yawn. "Sorry about that. I was just completely wiped out. Tonight will be different, I promise." Lies. Such easy lies. Cecilia wondered how many times before he had lied to her face with that same convincing sincerity. 4 months of deception. How had she missed it? Breakfast was served in the lodge's dining room for wedding guests staying overnight. Cecilia deliberately took her time getting ready, applying her makeup with careful precision, as if the perfect facade could somehow protect her from the reality beneath the surface. She chose a cream-colored dress from her honeymoon wardrobe, her movements mechanical while her mind raced with questions and scenarios. Should she confront them immediately? Wait and gather more evidence? Pretend she knew nothing until she decided what to do? Each option felt impossible, yet she had to choose one. For now, she decided, she would observe, watch them together in the light of day, now that her eyes were painfully open. When they entered the dining room, Tammy was already there, sipping coffee and chatting animatedly with another guest. She looked up as they approached, and Cecilia scrutinized her face for any sign of discomfort or guilt. There was a microsecond of tension in Tammy's smile before she stood and embraced Cecilia warmly. "There's the beautiful bride. How was your first night as Mrs. Thompson?" The audacity of the question made Cecilia's stomach turn. "Uneventful," she replied, meeting Tammy's eyes directly. Bradley was too tired for much of anything. If she had hoped to rattle either of them with the comment, she was disappointed. Bradley simply chuckled and shrugged as he reached for a coffee cup. "Guilty as charged. I practically passed out." Tammy laughed, the sound like fingernails on a chalkboard to Cecilia's ears. "Well, you had a big day. Both of you did." Breakfast continued with painful normality. Other guests stopped by their table to wish them well, and Cecilia performed her role as the happy newlywed, accepting congratulations with gracious smiles, while inwardly she was screaming. She noted how carefully Bradley and Tammy avoided prolonged eye contact with each other, how they never reached for the coffee pot or bread basket at the same time, how they seemed to have calculated precisely how to act around one another. As people began to leave, heading home or to Sunday activities, Cecilia excused herself to use the restroom. In the hallway, she nearly collided with her sister Jeanne, who was coming from the opposite direction. "Oh, sorry," Jeanne said, steadying herself. She looked at Cecilia more carefully. "Are you okay? You look pale." The genuine concern in her sister's voice almost undid Cecilia's composure. For a wild moment, she considered telling Jean everything, spilling the awful truth and seeking comfort from the one person who shared her blood. But they were practically strangers now, their relationship fractured by years of distance and misunderstandings. How could she burden Jean with this, especially when she herself didn't know what to do? "I'm fine," Cecilia assured her, forcing brightness into her voice. "Just tired. It was a long day yesterday." Jean nodded, though her eyes remained skeptical. "It was beautiful, though. You looked so happy." She hesitated, then added, "I'm glad I came." "I'm glad you did, too," Cecilia replied, and realized she meant it. Despite everything, seeing Jeanne again had been one bright spot in the day. "Listen," Jean said, shifting uncomfortably, "I know things haven't been great between us since Dad died, but I've missed you. Maybe we could try to stay in touch better. Grab lunch sometime when you're back from your honeymoon." "Honeymoon?" The word landed like lead in Cecilia's stomach. 2 weeks in the Caribbean with a man who had been lying to her for months, who had made a mockery of their vows less than 24 hours after speaking them. The thought was unbearable. "I'd like that," Cecilia said to her sister, surprising herself again with how much she meant it. "Let's exchange numbers before you leave." Back in their suite, Bradley was packing their bags for the afternoon flight. Their departure for St. Lucia was scheduled for 6 that evening, with a connection through Miami. Cecilia moved around the room in a daze, folding clothes and gathering toiletries. Each domestic action felt surreal, as if she were acting in a play about a happily married couple preparing for their honeymoon. "You're quiet," Bradley observed, as he zipped his suitcase closed. "Everything okay?" Cecilia looked at him, really looked at him, wondering how this person she thought she knew so well had become a complete stranger overnight. "Just processing everything," she said carefully. "It's a lot to take in." Bradley came to her, wrapping his arms around her from behind, and she fought the urge to pull away. "I know yesterday was a whirlwind," he said, his chin resting on her shoulder. "But the hard part's over. Now we just get to enjoy being married." The casual cruelty of his performance stunned her. Was this who he had always been? This practiced liar? Or had something changed during their relationship? When had he stopped loving her, if he ever truly had? When had he started loving Tammy instead? The hours before their departure crawled by with excruciating slowness. They said goodbye to the remaining guests, including Tommy, who hugged Cecilia tightly and whispered, "Have an amazing time. You deserve all the happiness in the world." The hypocrisy nearly broke Cecilia's composure. She pulled back from the embrace sooner than would have been natural, unable to maintain the charade a moment longer than necessary. If Tommy noticed, she didn't show it. Jean approached them in the parking lot as they loaded their luggage into the rental car. She handed Cecilia a small wrapped package. "Just a little something for your trip," she explained. "Nothing fancy." Cecilia unwrapped it to find a beautiful journal with her new initials, CT, embossed on the leather cover. "I thought you might want to document your honeymoon," Jean said, looking slightly embarrassed by the gesture. "It's perfect," Cecilia said, hugging her sister impulsively. "Thank you." As they drove away from the lodge, waving to the small cluster of friends and family who had gathered to see them off, Cecilia clutched the journal in her lap, staring straight ahead through the windshield. The beautiful mountain scenery blurred as tears threatened, but she refused to let them fall. Not yet. Not while Bradley could see. "That was nice of Jean," Bradley commented. "Seems like you two might be patching things up." "Maybe," Cecilia replied neutrally. "People can surprise you." At the airport, everything continued in the same surreal fashion. They checked in for their flight, the airline staff offering congratulations when they noticed the honeymoon tags on their luggage. They browsed duty-free shops, Bradley buying them both sunglasses for the beach. They had dinner at an overpriced airport restaurant, making small talk about their upcoming trip as if nothing were wrong. All the while, Cecilia's mind worked furiously, weighing her options. She could confront Bradley right now, create a scene in the middle of the airport terminal. She could wait until they reached St. Lucia, potentially ruining 2 weeks of her life, pretending everything was fine. Or she could... Final boarding call for Flight 736 to Miami. The announcement cut through her thoughts. Bradley stood, gathering their carry-ons. "That's us, babe. Ready for 2 weeks of paradise?" In that moment, clarity struck Cecilia with the force of lightning. She knew exactly what she needed to do. "Actually," she said, her voice surprisingly steady, "I just realized I forgot my prescription in my checked bag. I need to take it before the flight." Bradley frowned. "Can't you just take it when we land?" "It's for motion sickness," Cecilia improvised. "I need it before we take off, or I'll be miserable the whole flight." He sighed, but nodded. "Okay, but hurry. We're the last boarding group." "I'll be quick," she promised, grabbing her purse. "You go ahead and board. Save me the window seat." Bradley hesitated, but another boarding announcement spurred him toward the gate. "Hurry!" he called over his shoulder. Cecilia watched him disappear down the jetway, then turned and walked in the opposite direction, moving with purpose toward the airport exit. She had no intention of getting on that plane, no intention of spending 2 weeks in paradise with a man who had betrayed her in the most painful way possible. Let him wait for her. Let him wonder what had happened when the doors closed and her seat remained empty. Let him experience just a fraction of the confusion and hurt she was feeling. Outside, she hailed a taxi. "Where to?" the driver asked. Cecilia paused. Where could she go? Not back to the apartment she shared with Bradley. Not to Tammy's place, obviously. Her parents were deceased, and she hadn't spoken to extended family in years. Then she remembered her sister's parting words. "I'm staying at the Westfield downtown, if you need anything before I fly back tomorrow." "The Westfield Hotel, please," Cecilia told the driver, her decision made. As the taxi pulled away from the curb, her phone began to ring. Bradley's face lit up the screen. Cecilia silenced the call and turned off her phone entirely. Whatever came next, she would face it on her own terms, not his. For the first time since overhearing that devastating conversation, she felt a small sense of power returning. She had taken control of her story again, and it was only just beginning. The Westfield's lobby gleamed with polished marble and brass fixtures, a stark contrast to Cecilia's inner turmoil. She approached the front desk with determined steps, ignoring the curious glances from staff who likely wondered why a woman in casual travel clothes was checking in without luggage. "I need to reach a guest," Cecilia said to the receptionist. "Jean Meadows." "One moment, please," the young woman replied, tapping at her computer. After a brief call to Jean's room, she directed Cecilia to the 11th floor. The elevator ride gave Cecilia precious moments to collect herself, to prepare for the questions that would inevitably come. When Jean opened her door, surprise quickly transformed into concern at the sight of her sister's pale face and red-rimmed eyes. "Cecilia? What happened? Aren't you supposed to be on a plane?" The carefully constructed composure Cecilia had maintained since leaving the airport crumbled at the simple question. She stepped into Jean's room, and the tears finally came. Not delicate, cinematic tears, but ugly, wrenching sobs that bent her double. "He's cheating on me," she managed between gasps. "With Tammy." Jean guided her to the edge of the bed. "What? Bradley? How do you know?" Between sobs, Cecilia recounted everything. The separate sleeping arrangements, the overheard conversation, the 4 months of deception, and her decision to abandon Bradley at the airport. Jean listened without interrupting, her expression shifting from shock to anger to fierce protectiveness. "That absolute bastard," she said when Cecilia finished. "And Tammy, your maid of honor, your best friend? That's beyond betrayal." Cecilia nodded, beyond words now that the story had been told. The reality of her situation was sinking in with brutal clarity. Her marriage had ended before it truly began. Her closest friendship was revealed as a devastating lie. She had no home to return to, not the apartment she shared with Bradley, filled with wedding gifts and shared memories. And tomorrow, once Bradley realized she wasn't coming, all hell would break loose. As if reading her thoughts, Jean said, "You'll stay with me tonight, and tomorrow we'll figure out next steps." She hesitated, then added, "I know we haven't been close, but I'm here for you, Ceci. Whatever you need." The childhood nickname, one Jean hadn't used in over a decade, brought fresh tears to Cecilia's eyes. But these were different. A tiny spark of gratitude kindled amidst the devastation. "Thank you," she whispered. "I didn't know where else to go." Jean squeezed her hand. "You came to the right place." That night, curled on the hotel room's pull-out sofa, while Jean slept in the bed, Cecilia finally turned her phone back on. It immediately erupted with notifications, 17 missed calls from Bradley, 12 from Tammy, and dozens of text messages. Bradley's texts evolved from confusion to irritation to concern. "Where are you? The plane's about to leave. They're closing the doors." Are you serious right now? Cecilia, what the hell? The plane just left without you. I'm worried. Please call me as soon as you get this. Did something happen? Are you okay? I'm calling the police if I don't hear from you in an hour. Tammy's messages showed similar progression. Bradley says you missed the flight? What's going on? He's really worried. We all are. Please just let someone know you're safe. The audacity of their concern, the pretense of worry when they had been deceiving her for months, sent a fresh wave of anger through Cecilia. She typed a single message to Bradley. I know about you and Tammy. Don't contact me again. She blocked both their numbers immediately after sending it, then deleted their contact information entirely. Whatever fallout came from her message, she didn't want to witness it directly. The following morning, Jean helped Cecilia construct a plan. First, they extended John's hotel stay by 3 days, giving Cecilia a safe place to regroup. Then, while Bradley would likely still be in Miami trying to figure out his next move, they would go to the apartment and collect Cecilia's essential belongings. Jean would fly back to Phoenix the following week, rather than the next day as planned, and Cecilia would go with her, putting physical distance between herself and the betrayal while she sorted out her next steps. You can stay with me as long as you need, Jean assured her. My place isn't fancy, but there's plenty of room. Entering the apartment she had shared with Bradley felt like visiting a museum dedicated to a life that no longer existed. Everything looked exactly as she had left it 2 days earlier, before the wedding. Mail stacked neatly on the counter, a half-empty coffee mug in the sink, their framed engagement photos displayed proudly on the mantel. Cecilia moved through the rooms with detached efficiency, filling suitcases with clothes, gathering important documents, and collecting irreplaceable personal items. Jean followed, silently supporting her sister's methodical dismantling of her married life before it had truly begun. In the bedroom closet, Cecilia's hand froze as she reached for a sweater. Hanging beside it was a scarf she didn't recognize, an expensive-looking silk piece in colors Tammy often wore. She pulled it from the hanger, her suspicions confirmed by the faint trace of Tammy's distinctive perfume. She's been here, Cecilia said, holding up the scarf for Jean to see. In our home, in our bedroom. The discovery hardened something inside her. Any lingering doubt, any thought that perhaps she had misunderstood or overreacted, vanished. The betrayal was complete and undeniable. Before they left, Cecilia wrote a note and left it propped against the wedding photo on the dresser. I've taken what's mine. The rest, including your lies, is all yours. She placed her wedding and engagement rings beside it, beautiful, expensive symbols of promises already broken. As days turned into weeks in Phoenix, Cecilia began the painful process of rebuilding her life. She filed for an annulment, citing fraud, a legal term that seemed pathetically inadequate to describe the magnitude of Bradley's deception. She opened a new bank account, transferred her share of their joint savings, and began looking for work in Arizona. Each practical step helped anchor her in her new reality, even as her emotional wounds remained raw and bleeding. Bradley made several attempts to contact her through email and social media, his messages oscillating between desperate pleas for forgiveness and angry accusations of overreaction. It just happened, he wrote in one particularly galling email. We never meant to hurt you. We can't help who we fall in love with. Cecilia didn't respond to any of his messages, but each one scraped against her healing heart like sandpaper. The casual cruelty of his excuses, the implicit suggestion that their 3 years together meant so little he could discard them for an affair with her best friend. It all cut deeply. Tommy's attempts at contact were fewer, but no less upsetting. I know you hate me now, she wrote, but someday I hope you can understand that we didn't plan this. I've loved him from the first moment you introduced us, but I fought it for so long. I'm sorry it ended this way. C'est. This message Cecilia did respond to with a single line. You're right. I do hate you now. 6 weeks after the wedding, that wasn't, Cecilia found herself sitting across from Jean at a local cafe, sipping tea and discussing her job prospects. The initial shock had faded, replaced by a dull, persistent ache that flared unpredictably into sharp pain at random triggers. A glimpse of a happy couple holding hands, a wedding announcement on social media, the discovery of one of Bradley's t-shirts she had accidentally packed in her hurry to leave. "The design firm seems promising," Jean was saying. "They liked your portfolio, and the fact that you can start immediately is a plus for them." Cecilia nodded, trying to focus on the practical aspects of her situation rather than the emotional wreckage. "The salary is less than I was making in Chicago, but the cost of living is lower here, so it balances out." "Ooh, and you'd be close to me," Jean added with a small smile. Their rekindled relationship had been the one positive outcome of the whole ordeal. Living together had forced them to address old conflicts and misunderstandings, clearing away years of accumulated resentment. "That's the biggest selling point," Cecilia agreed, returning the smile. Her phone buzzed with an email notification. Glancing down, she saw the subject line: "Final annulment papers. Action required." Her lawyer had warned her this would be coming. The last step in legally erasing a marriage that had existed for less than 24 hours. "Is that it?" Jean asked, noticing Cecilia's expression. "The annulment papers. I just need to sign them electronically and it's done." Cecilia stared at her phone, her finger hovering over the notification. "It's strange. I know the marriage was a sham, that it was over before it even started, but there's still something final about this." Jean reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "It's okay to feel whatever you're feeling, Cece. Grief isn't just for when someone dies. You're grieving the future you thought you would have." Cecilia nodded, her throat tight. She clicked the email, followed the instructions to digitally sign the documents, and hit submit. A message appeared. "Your signature has been recorded. You will receive confirmation when all parties have completed the process." "It's done," she said, setting down her phone. The expected rush of relief didn't come. Instead, she felt oddly hollow, as if part of herself had been scooped out and discarded, along with her brief marriage. That evening, scrolling mindlessly through social media before bed, a habit she knew was unhealthy but couldn't seem to break, Cecilia came across a photo that stopped her cold. It was Bradley and Tammy, clearly on vacation somewhere tropical, probably the St. Lucia resort that should have been Cecilia's honeymoon destination. They were smiling at the camera, sunburned and happy, Bradley's arm draped possessively around Tammy's shoulders. The caption read, "Sometimes the heart knows what it wants before the mind catches up. Blessed for new beginnings." Cecilia stared at the image, waiting for the tidal wave of pain to hit. But instead, something unexpected happened. As she looked at their smiling faces, their carefully curated display of newfound happiness, she felt a surprising emotion bubble up. Pity. These two people had built their relationship on lies and betrayal. They had hurt someone who had loved them both deeply and genuinely. Whatever they had together was rooted in deceit. How solid could that foundation possibly be? For the first time since discovering their affair, Cecilia felt something like peace steal over her. She closed the app without commenting, set her phone aside, and opened Jean's wedding gift, the journal she had barely touched since that day. On the first blank page, she began to write, "Today I signed the annulment papers. Today I saw a photo of them together and realized something important. Their betrayal defines who they are, not who I am. It's time to start writing a new story, my story, and they don't get to be characters in it anymore." 3 months after relocating to Phoenix, Cecilia's life had taken on a new rhythm. She had secured the position at the design firm and thrown herself into work with singular focus. Her small apartment, just 15 minutes from Jean's place, was sparsely furnished but entirely her own, a blank canvas awaiting her personal touch. Each weekend, she would add one new item: a colorful throw pillow, a potted plant, a piece of art for the bare walls. Small steps toward making the space truly hers. The annulment had been finalized without further drama. Bradley had signed the papers without contesting anything, perhaps recognizing that fighting would only delay the inevitable. Financially, they had disentangled with surprising efficiency. The wedding gifts had been returned where possible, with polite notes explaining the circumstances in the vaguest terms. The apartment in Chicago had been sublet, and eventually, Bradley had bought out her portion of the lease. These practical matters resolved, Cecilia was left with the harder work of emotional recovery. At her sister's gentle insistence, she had begun seeing a therapist, Dr. Martha Collins, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and an uncanny ability to ask questions that cut straight to the heart of Cecilia's pain. "You've done remarkably well with the logistics," Dr. Collins observed during one session in her warmly lit office. "You've secured housing, employment, handled the legal aspects. But I notice you still flinch when the topic of relationships comes up." Cecilia shifted in her seat, uncomfortable with the accuracy of the observation. "Wouldn't anyone, after what happened?" "Perhaps," the therapist acknowledged. "But I wonder if you're giving yourself permission to feel the full spectrum of your emotions about Bradley and Tammy's betrayal." "I'm angry," Cecilia said immediately. "I'm hurt. I'm humiliated. What other emotions should I be feeling?" Dr. Collins leaned forward slightly. "Those are all valid. But sometimes beneath anger is a deeper grief, not just for the relationship you lost, but for the story you were telling yourself about who you were within that relationship." The word struck Cecilia with unexpected force. She had been Bradley's fiancée, then his wife, for such a brief moment. Before that, she had been Tammy's best friend for 15 years. These roles had formed core parts of her identity, anchoring her sense of self. Now both were gone, leaving her adrift. "I don't know who I am without them," Cecilia admitted quietly. "Is that pathetic?" "It's human," Dr. Collins corrected gently. "We define ourselves partly through our relationships with others. When those relationships change dramatically or end, it's natural to experience a kind of identity crisis. The question now is, who do you want to become?" That question followed Cecilia out of the therapist's office and into the weeks that followed. Who did she want to become? The betrayal had revealed a painful truth. She had been living with blinders on, missing signs that should have been obvious. Bradley's late nights at the office that started approximately 4 months before the wedding. Tammy's sudden interest in Bradley's industry, asking detailed questions about his work. The way they sometimes fell silent when Cecilia entered a room. Had she been willfully blind, or simply trusting to a fault? Either way, she was determined not to make the same mistake twice. The new Cecilia would be more observant, less naive. The new Cecilia would not build her entire identity around a relationship. As winter gave way to spring in the desert, bringing with it explosions of wildflowers and the scent of citrus blossoms, Cecilia felt the first tentative stirrings of renewal within herself as well. She joined a weekend hiking group, pushing herself up steep trails to be rewarded with breathtaking views of the valley. She enrolled in a cooking class, learning to prepare dishes she had always considered beyond her skills. She reconnected with old college friends through video calls, carefully explaining her sudden move without dwelling on the painful details. One Friday evening in April, Jean convinced her to attend a photography workshop, a weekend-long intensive course held in Sedona. "You used to love photography in college," Jean reminded her, "before you got so busy with work and everything else." Cecilia hesitated, then agreed. It had been years since she'd picked up a camera for anything more than casual smartphone photos. The thought of immersing herself in a forgotten passion was appealing, and the change of scenery couldn't hurt. The workshop was held at a rustic retreat center surrounded by Sedona's famous red rocks. 15 participants gathered in the main hall that first evening, a diverse group ranging from serious hobbyists with expensive equipment to complete beginners clutching newly purchased cameras. The instructor, a renowned landscape photographer with wild gray hair and weathered skin, welcomed them with infectious enthusiasm. Photography isn't just about capturing what you see, he told them. It's about training yourself to see differently in the first place. As participants introduced themselves, Cecilia noticed a man about her age sitting across the circle. He was tall and lean, with warm brown skin and thoughtful eyes behind simple wire-framed glasses. When his turn came, he introduced himself as Joseph Taylor, a high school science teacher from Flagstaff who had received the workshop as a birthday gift from his students. "They think I need a hobby besides grading their papers," he explained with a self-deprecating smile. And they're probably right. Throughout that first evening's lecture, Cecilia found her attention repeatedly drawn to Joseph. There was something compelling about his focused expression, the thoughtful questions he asked, the way he jotted notes in a small leather journal not unlike the one Jean had given her. But she quickly tamped down these observations. She wasn't here to notice men. She was here to reconnect with photography, with herself. The next morning, they ventured out in small groups to practice landscape techniques. Cecilia found herself assigned to the same group as Joseph, along with 3 other participants. As they hiked to their first location, Joseph fell into step beside her. "First time in Sedona?" he asked. "Actually, no," Cecilia replied. "I came here years ago on a college spring break trip. We were supposed to be in Mexico, but plans fell through at the last minute, so we ended up here instead." "Let me guess," Joseph said with a grin. "You expected to be disappointed, but ended up loving it." Cecilia looked at him in surprise. "How did you know?" "That's everyone's Sedona story," he explained. "You come here as a consolation prize and leave wondering why it wasn't your first choice all along." Their conversation flowed easily as they set up their tripods and experimented with different compositions. Joseph had a quiet, unassuming manner that Cecilia found calming. There were no awkward silences, no feeling that she needed to perform or impress. When they reviewed their morning's work over lunch, she was genuinely interested in his perspective on the images she had captured. "You have a good eye for detail," he told her, studying a close-up she had taken of juniper bark with lichen. "Most people come here and just shoot the big vistas, but you noticed this small, perfect thing." His observation touched her more deeply than seemed reasonable for a casual comment from a stranger. When was the last time someone had truly seen how she viewed the world? On Sunday afternoon, as the workshop wrapped up and participants exchanged contact information, Joseph approached her with his camera in hand. "I got a shot of you yesterday," he said, showing her the display screen, "when you were photographing that hawk. I hope you don't mind." The image showed Cecilia in profile, her expression intense with concentration as she focused her lens upward. The red rocks rose behind her, and the light caught her hair, turning it to spun gold. But what struck her most was how peaceful she looked, present and absorbed in the moment in a way she hadn't felt in months. "It's beautiful," she said truthfully. Could you send it to me?" "Of course," Joseph replied, his smile reaching all the way to his eyes. They exchanged email addresses and, after a moment's hesitation, phone numbers as well. "I come down to Phoenix sometimes for museum exhibits," he mentioned casually. "Maybe we could meet up sometime? Compare notes on how our photography is progressing?" Cecilia felt a flutter of panic, followed by a stronger surge of determination. This wasn't a date. It was 2 workshop acquaintances maintaining a connection over a shared interest. Still, she found herself smoothing her hair as she considered her response. "I'd like that," she said finally, surprising herself with how much she meant it. Back in Phoenix that evening, she showed Jean the photographs she had taken, carefully avoiding any mention of Joseph until her sister's direct question. "So, meet anyone interesting?" Cecilia busied herself with putting away her camera. It was a diverse group, some really talented photographers. Jean raised an eyebrow. "That's not what I asked." "There was one person," Cecilia admitted reluctantly. "A science teacher named Joseph. We talked a bit. He took a nice photo of me." And? Jean prompted. And nothing, Cecilia insisted. He suggested meeting up sometime when he's in Phoenix, but it's not a thing. Jean studied her sister's face, then nodded, mercifully dropping the subject. Well, I'm glad you went. You seem lighter somehow. 3 weeks later, Cecilia's phone chimed with a text from Joseph. He was coming to Phoenix that weekend for an exhibit at the art museum and wondered if she'd like to meet for coffee beforehand. Cecilia stared at the message for a full 5 minutes before responding with a casual, "Sounds good." As she got ready on Saturday morning, Cecilia found herself changing outfits 3 times, a behavior she immediately recognized and chastised herself for. "This is not a date," she told her reflection sternly. "This is 2 photographers meeting to discuss photography." But when she saw Joseph waiting outside the coffee shop, a genuine smile spreading across his face at her approach, she felt a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with the Arizona sun. They spent 2 hours talking before even heading to the museum, conversation flowing from photography to books, to their respective jobs, to favorite hiking trails. Not once did Joseph ask about her past relationships or why she had moved to Phoenix. Not once did he check his phone while she was speaking or interrupt her thoughts. When she mentioned her sister, he asked thoughtful follow-up questions that showed he was truly listening. It wasn't until they were walking through the exhibit, admiring a series of black and white portraits, that Joseph shared something personal. "My ex-wife left me for my best friend 3 years ago," he said quietly, his eyes on a particularly striking photograph of an elderly couple. "That's why your comment about noticing details resonated with me. I was blind to what was happening right in front of me for months." Cecilia froze, the parallels to her own experience hitting her like a physical blow. "I'm so sorry," she managed. Joseph turned to her with a small smile. "It's okay. I've had time to process it, but it changed me, made me more observant in some ways, more guarded in others." "I understand," Cecilia said, the words feeling wholly inadequate. Should she share her own story? The thought made her stomach clench. She had told so few people the full truth, protecting herself from judgment and pity. Joseph seemed to sense her internal struggle. "You don't have to say anything," he assured her. "I just wanted you to know where I'm coming from, why I might move a bit slowly when it comes to connections." The gentle way he acknowledged what was developing between them, without pressure or expectation, loosened something in Cecilia's chest. "My husband and maid of honor," she found herself saying. "The night of our wedding, I overheard them talking about their 4-month affair." Joseph's eyes widened. I don't even have words for how awful that is." "It was 7 months ago," Cecilia said, surprised to realize how much time had passed. "The annulment was finalized 3 months ago." They stood in silence for a moment, surrounded by strangers moving through the exhibit, yet connected in their shared experience of betrayal. "Well," Joseph said finally, "I guess we both know what it's like to have the rug pulled out from under us." The simple acknowledgement, free from platitudes or forced optimism, felt like a gift. As they continued through the exhibit, Cecilia felt a curious sense of relief. Joseph understood the very specific pain she had endured. There would be no need to explain her hesitations or fears. No need to pretend she was further along in her healing than she truly was. When they parted that afternoon, Joseph asked if he could see her again the next time he was in Phoenix. Cecilia agreed without hesitation. This wasn't a romantic beginning, not yet, but it was something equally valuable. A genuine connection with someone who saw her clearly and valued what he saw. That night, Cecilia opened her journal again, something she had been doing more regularly since the workshop. She wrote, "Today, I spent time with someone who has been where I've been. It wasn't romantic, but it was real, and for the first time in a long time, I'm curious about what happens next." Over the next 6 months, Cecilia and Joseph developed a friendship that defied easy categorization. They met whenever his teaching schedule allowed him to visit Phoenix, or when she could make the drive to Flagstaff. They hiked desert trails and forest paths, cameras in hand, stopping frequently to capture the play of light through canyon walls or the delicate structure of a wildflower. They explored museums and bookstores, debated films and music, and gradually shared the deeper stories of their lives. Joseph told her about growing up as the son of a single mother who worked 3 jobs to put him through college, about his passion for inspiring students who struggled with science, about the 2 years of depression that followed his divorce. Cecilia shared her complicated relationship with her parents before they passed, her career frustrations and ambitions, and eventually, the full details of Bradley and Tammy's betrayal. The strangest part, she confessed one evening as they sat on her small balcony watching the sunset, was how quickly they rewrote our history. In Bradley's version, they couldn't help falling in love, as if they were passive participants, not people actively making choices to lie and betray. Joseph nodded, understanding in his eyes. Amanda, my ex, said something similar, that they never meant for it to happen. Teet, but they meant every secret text, every lie about working late, every time they looked me in the eye and pretended everything was normal. There was no bitterness in his voice, just a clear-eyed assessment of truth that Cecilia found immensely comforting. Here was someone who had walked through the same fire and emerged not burned beyond recognition, but tempered. In November, exactly 1 year after what should have been her wedding anniversary, Cecilia received an unexpected email from Tommy. Her stomach clenched as she opened it, bracing for more excuses or pleas for forgiveness. Instead, she found something entirely different. Cecilia, I don't expect a response to this, and I don't deserve your forgiveness. But you deserve the truth. Bradley and I ended things 3 months ago. The relationship that we destroyed your happiness for turned out to be built on nothing substantial. Once the excitement of sneaking around was gone, we discovered we wanted different things, valued different things. He's dating someone from his office now. The irony isn't lost on me. I've been in therapy, trying to understand why I was capable of betraying the person who had been my closest friend for 15 years. I don't have all the answers yet, but I know it wasn't about you. It was about my own insecurities and selfishness. I know words can't undo what we did to you. I just wanted you to know that karma is real, and that I truly regret losing your friendship more than anything else I've lost in this mess. I hope you've found happiness. Cecilia read the email 3 times, waiting for the surge of anger, or vindication, or hurt. Instead, she felt a strange sense of closure, as if the final page of a difficult book had been turned, allowing her to set it aside at last. She showed the email to Joseph that weekend when he came to Phoenix. They were preparing dinner together in her kitchen, moving around each other with the easy familiarity they had developed. Are you going to respond? He asked, after reading it carefully. Cecilia considered the question as she chopped bell peppers. No, she decided. There's nothing more to say, but I'm not angry anymore. That's progress, I think. Joseph smiled, the warm expression that never failed to create a flutter in her chest. Significant progress. They had been dancing around the evolving nature of their relationship for weeks, neither willing to be the first to acknowledge that what had begun as friendship had grown into something deeper. Cecilia still carried the fear of being hurt again, of misreading signs, of trusting too easily. Joseph, she sensed, was equally cautious, respectful of her recent wounds and his own. That night, after dinner, they sat close together on her couch, ostensibly to review photographs from their recent trip to the botanical gardens. Joseph paused on an image Cecilia had taken of him. He was examining a massive saguaro cactus, his face in profile, completely absorbed in the moment. You see me, he said quietly, the real me. Cecilia looked up from the camera display to find him watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch. You see me too, she replied. Even the parts I tried to hide after everything happened. Especially those parts, he said, setting the camera aside. With deliberate slowness, giving her every opportunity to pull away, he reached for her hand. "Cecilia, I need to tell you something." Her heart hammered against her ribs. "Okay, I'm in love with you," he said simply. "I have been for months, but I understand if you're not ready, or if you don't feel the same way. Friendship with you is enough for me, if that's all you want to offer." The words hung in the air between them, honest and unadorned. No grand gestures, no dramatic declarations, just truth, offered with both hope and the willingness to accept disappointment. Cecilia looked at their joined hands, at this man who had become her closest confidant and favorite companion. The fear was still there. Of course it was, but it no longer controlled her. What Dr. Collins had said in therapy months ago came back to her. The opposite of trust isn't suspicion. It's stagnation. At some point, to move forward, you have to be willing to risk being hurt again. "I love you too," she said, her voice steady despite the magnitude of the admission. "I think I have since Sedona, but I was afraid." Joseph's smile was like sunrise breaking across his face. "I know about being afraid," he said, "but I'm more afraid of not telling you how I feel, of missing this chance." When he kissed her, it wasn't the passionate rush she had expected, but something deeper and more profound. A recognition, a homecoming, a promise. In the months that followed, their relationship deepened with the same thoughtful intentionality that characterized everything between them. Joseph never pushed for more than Cecilia was ready to give. He never had to wonder where he was or who he was with. His transparency was complete, without being performative. They built their connection on a foundation of mutual respect and shared understanding, brick by careful brick. For Valentine's Day, instead of expensive jewelry or elaborate gestures, Joseph gave her a handmade album containing prints of the photographs they had taken together over the past year, arranged chronologically. The first image was the one he had taken of her in Sedona. The last was a self-portrait of them on a New Year's hike, faces pressed together, laughing into the camera. Between those bookends was the visual story of their relationship's evolution, captured in landscapes and quiet moments. "I see it now," Cecilia said as she turned the pages, "how we were falling in love all along." "You see everything," Joseph replied. "That's one of the many reasons I love you." In April, Joseph was offered a position teaching advanced placement biology at a prestigious private school in Phoenix. The job would mean a significant pay increase, more resources for his teaching, and the end of their long-distance relationship. He called Cecilia immediately after receiving the offer. "They want me to start in August," he told her, excitement evident in his voice. "I'd need to move down by July." "That's wonderful news," Cecilia said, genuinely thrilled for him. "They'd be lucky to have you." There was a pause before Joseph asked, "How would you feel about me being in Phoenix full-time?" The question carried weight beyond the obvious. They had maintained separate homes, separate lives, even as their hearts intertwined. This would represent a new phase, a commitment to seeing each other daily rather than in carefully planned visits. "I'd love having you here," Cecilia answered truthfully, "but I don't want you to take the job just for me. It has to be right for you too." "It is," Joseph assured her, "but you're definitely part of the appeal." 2 weeks later, they were having dinner at her favorite restaurant when Joseph grew uncharacteristically quiet. Cecilia watched him push pasta around his plate, a small furrow between his brows. "Everything okay?" she asked. "You seem distracted." Joseph set down his fork and reached for his water glass, taking a long sip before meeting her eyes. "I've been thinking about something, and I'm not sure how to bring it up." A flutter of anxiety stirred in Cecilia's stomach, quickly soothed by the open sincerity in Joseph's expression. Whatever was on his mind, he wasn't hiding it or scheming behind her back. That knowledge alone was reassuring. "Just say it," she encouraged. "We've always been honest with each other." Joseph took a deep breath. "With the new job starting in August, I need to find a place to live in Phoenix. And I was wondering if you might consider us living together." Cecilia blinked, surprised not by the suggestion itself but by her own immediate internal response, a surge of warmth rather than panic. "I know it's a big step," Joseph continued quickly, "and I completely understand if you're not ready. We could look at places near each other, or I could find somewhere on my own, and we could revisit the conversation in a year. There's no pressure, Cecilia. I just want you to know what I'm hoping for." She reached across the table and took his hand. "Ask me properly," she said, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Relief washed over Joseph's face. "Cecilia Meadows, would you consider sharing your life and an apartment with me?" "Yes," she said simply. "I would." The word hung between them, significant in its smallness, in its certainty. Yes to moving forward. Yes to building something new together. Yes to trusting again. That night, lying beside Joseph in her bed, soon to be their bed, Cecilia marveled at the journey that had brought her here. 16 months ago, she had stood in a beautiful white dress and promised forever to a man who had already betrayed her. Today, she wore faded pajamas and had made a much simpler promise to a man whose integrity she never questioned. "What are you thinking about?" Joseph asked, his voice soft in the darkness. Cecilia traced the outline of his face with her fingertip. "I was thinking about how differently things turned out than I expected. A year and a half ago, I thought my life was over, that I'd never trust anyone again, never feel safe with someone again." Joseph caught her hand and pressed a kiss to her palm. "And now? And now I know something I didn't know then," she replied. "True love isn't about grand gestures or perfect wedding days. It's about showing up, day after day. It's about seeing each other clearly and choosing each other anyway, flaws and fears and all." Joseph pulled her closer. "I choose you, Cecilia, today and every day." "I choose you too," she whispered. "Even when I was afraid, I think I was choosing you all along." As summer bloomed across the desert, Joseph moved into Cecilia's apartment. They combined their book collections and coffee mugs, negotiated closet space and morning routines, and discovered the daily rhythm of sharing a life. It wasn't always seamless. They had disagreements about dishes in the sink and temperature settings, but there was a fundamental respect that underpinned even their conflicts. In September, 2 years after her aborted wedding, Cecilia received a small package in the mail. Inside was the journal Jean had given her as a wedding gift, now filled with entries tracking her journey from devastation to healing. She had given it to her sister to hold when she moved in with Joseph, feeling she no longer needed that particular outlet. A note from Jean accompanied the journal. "Found this while cleaning out the guest room. Thought you might want it back, not to revisit the pain, but to remind yourself how far you've come. Love you, sis." That evening, Cecilia and Joseph sat on the balcony of their shared home, watching another magnificent Arizona sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. She showed him the journal, and together they read the final entry she had written months earlier. "I used to think love was supposed to feel like fireworks, exciting, dramatic, all-consuming. What I've found with Joseph feels more like sunrise, warm, steady, illuminating. It doesn't demand attention. It simply reveals the beauty that was always there. Bradley and Tammy's betrayal was the most painful experience of my life. But today, I can say something I never thought possible. I'm grateful. Not for the deception or the hurt, but for where it led me. Without that terrible night, I might never have reconnected with Jean. I might never have moved to Arizona or rediscovered photography. I might never have met Joseph. The greatest lesson I've learned is this. Real love brings peace, not anxiety. Real love sees clearly, not through rose-colored glasses. Real love grows stronger through challenges, not in spite of them. I don't know what the future holds, but for the first time in a long time, I'm not afraid to find out. Joseph closed the journal and wrapped his arm around Cecilia, pulling her close against the desert's evening chill. "That's beautiful," he said, "and true." Cecilia rested her head against his shoulder, watching as the first stars appeared in the deepening blue above them. The pain of betrayal had shaped her, but it no longer defined her. She had rebuilt herself, piece by piece, into someone stronger and wiser than before. Someone who could recognize real love when it appeared, not in a flash of fireworks, but in the steady light of each new day. "We should frame this sunset," Joseph murmured. "It's perfect," Cecilia smiled, turning to meet his gaze. "It is," she agreed, "but I have a feeling there are even better ones ahead." If you enjoyed the story, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. And drop a comment below. What city are you watching from? And if your heart tells you to, feel free to leave me a tip on Buy Me a Coffee. Just check the first pinned comment. Thanks for keeping me company and for the coffee, and I'll see you in the next story.